Hi, this is Josh with a quick note before the episode starts. Unfortunately, I had some technical difficulties and my mic was a little wonky. So we tried our best to fix it. Hopefully, it's not too distracting, but just wanted to give you that note. Also, this is a two-part episode. So we're talking about the types of songs and musicals. We'll get about halfway through, then we'll end this episode, and next week we will share part two where we finish the conversation. So without further ado, please enjoy. Hello and welcome to Show Tuned. This is a podcast about musicals and the craft of storytelling through song.
Each week, we explore all the ways that songs tell stories. That can be melodies, harmonies, lyrics, or dialogue, characters and scenes. And we explore all the ways that it all comes together in this really unique medium where the songs are actually the engine of the story. As Josh said, I am Brett Boles. I am a professional songwriter. I'm an educator. I am also the creator of the hit TikTok and Instagram series, The MT and The MT Studio, where for about 5 years now, I've been spilling the tea on why certain musical theater songs make us feel a certain way and helping songwriters hone their craft.
Exactly. And I'm Josh Shelton. I am a filmmaker and a songwriter trying to bring the genre of movie musicals into the contemporary film and digital and video landscape. So today on the show, we're going to talk about the classic types of songs that you find in musicals, sort of like the 10, song tropes. Is that how you would call it? How would you call it?
That's how I would refer to them. And there are shows of every variety and color and shape and size and length, but you will find that the vast majority of musicals, no matter how long or short they are, no matter what the storyline is, will contain many, if not all, of these types or categories of songs.
Yeah, exactly. Just as we start this podcast, let's define some of the classic types of songs that we find in musicals and fans come to expect. And therefore, as songwriters, they're fun to write and discover and know what we're trying to do. And also, we have a Patreon where you can join for free. But for paid subscribers, we record bonus content. We're going to record conversation about some of the most subversive or surprising approaches to these song types. So we're going to talk about maybe the rules and then how to break them and who's done that. Right?
Ooh, yeah, I'm ready for that. Sign me up. But before we get into all of that, we like to start every episode with a quick, little intro segment that we call, What is your I Want song for this week? We like to have a sort of an orienting narrative for ourselves at the beginning of each week. So I'm going to have Josh go first, and I'm going to ask you, Josh, what is your I Want song for this week?
My I Want song this week is listen to the classics, listen to the greats. I was listening to Bob Dylan this week and was just reminded of what a unique, important songwriter he was. And also that a lot of his songwriting comes from a folk tradition before him, right? And it got me thinking about how so many of the people we listen to and reference, especially in the 20th century, were listening to the greats whose music or any art form has been around much longer, whether it's, listening to Beethoven or, Chopin or Ravel. I just want to remind myself in this current ecosystem where we get all kinds of content and all sorts of new things to watch or listen to, or we're inundated with all this stuff, a reminder to just go back and listen to the classics. Take a moment to listen to the masters who have survived decades, if not centuries.
I love that. And there's always, not only is there something to learn from all of those classics, but they're also just inspiring. And sometimes it's nice to just listen to something that inspires you.
Truly,
Like that.
truly inspiring. And also it's a reminder that we should, of course, study whatever's happening now and be inspired by whatever's happening now. But I think there's also a balance of we don't want to just be a derivative of a derivative, right? We can have that same inspiration from a original source or something further back. So that's my reminder to myself. Listen to the classics, read poetry, read a book, go back a couple generations for my various inputs this week.
Love that.
So what is your I Want song this week?
So this week, actually, this past last week and this week has been for me about finding new and innovative ways to serve my community of people that follow me online. I serve my writers very well, but I'm trying to think of ways to serve the musical theater fans who aren't necessarily writers too. So it's about finding new and innovative ways to serve my community. I don't know what I would how I would bundle that into a nice tidy hook right now, but that's my overarching I want for this week is to find a way to do that.
That's great. And this podcast is hopefully one way, but
Absolutely.
also your hook could be, how can I help?
There you go.
Let's move into the main topic for the day, the types of songs in musicals.
Before we get too deep in the weeds on all the different kinds of numbers, I think it's important to talk about one thing before we get into that. And so this idea is that every song in a musical has a job to do. And if it doesn't have a job to do, it doesn't belong in the show. Full stop. Because in musical theater, songs are more than decoration. They're not just there because something would sound good or because we want a big emotional moment, although there's a place for that too. But songs, as we say at the beginning of this podcast, songs are storytelling engines. They happen because something in the scene reaches a point where speaking is no longer enough. And when that happens, the song has to do something that dialogue can't do. It has to change something. It has to move something forward, reveal something new, or deepen something that we didn't fully understand before. And this is where some writers, especially those writers who are just starting out, get into a little bit of trouble because they'll write a beautiful song that doesn't actually function for the moment it's supposed to function in. Like it doesn't shift the character, or it doesn't advance the story, or it doesn't reframe the situation in some way. So the audience will listen to it and they might enjoy it. And then the show just kind of picks back up where it left off. And that is a little bit of a problem because in a really great, effective musical, if you remove a song, the story should not work. The story should break. You'll feel the hole where that song would have been or should have been. So when we start talking about different types of songs, what we're really talking about are different kinds of jobs that those songs do, different ways that songs function inside a story. So instead of thinking, what kind of song should I write? Writers should be thinking, what does this moment in the story need to do that only a song can accomplish?
That's a great place to start and to frame our perspective because the songs exist for a purpose. And like we talk about, this is something that I find so fun about songwriting for musicals is that it has a job to do. I love it. Simple. It has a job to do. We have other songs we can write that are artistic expressions or are a way that we are navigating our life or our experiences or a connection with someone. But these songs serve another purpose as well.
So we're gonna list the types, the categories of musical theater songs for you, and then we're gonna go back and we're gonna tackle them one at a time. So we've got our opening number. We have the I Want song or the character establishment song. We have our ballad. We have a conditional love song. We have comedy songs or list songs. We have charm songs. We have conflict or confrontation songs. We have reprises or reprises, both pronunciations are correct. We have ensemble numbers or act finale numbers. And then we have 11 o'clock numbers. So those are really the standard types of songs that you'll find in almost every musical.
Exactly. And if there's anything we haven't thought of or that we've forgotten, or if you think there's a different type of song, please let us know, leave a comment, and we'll talk about it in a future episode. But starting with those 10 seems to be a great place for now. And we'll see if we even get through this in one episode or if it becomes a two-parter. So should we dive into opening numbers? Start at
We
the
should.
top?
Yes. All right. So The opening number, arguably the most important number in the show. Why is that? Well, the opening number establishes the world that we are living in. It establishes the tone of the show. It establishes the rules of the world, not only the rules of the world that the musical is set in, but the rules of how the audience is supposed to respond to this show. Are we supposed to, or are we allowed to laugh? Is this going to be something that has comedic moments built in? Is this a farce? Is this something where we're going to cry a lot? The opening number of Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, which is called Comedy Tonight, very different from the opening number of Ragtime. They're very different shows serving very different purposes, and that opening number needs to establish all of those things right off the bat, and it needs to engage the audience immediately. And it is essentially a contract with the audience, which says, what kind of show are we watching? It's super important.
I love that you pointed out how there are different types of opening numbers. And I think that's another thing to remember, is that even within a sort of type or a trope, songwriters and shows can do them in different ways. The job of the song can be different based on the type of show it is. If we're watching a big, song and dance, colorful show, that opening number is probably going to be big, dancey, and set us up for this extravagant world, right?
Yes. And so, fun fact about opening numbers, this isn't true for all shows, but it is true for most shows. The opening number is usually one of the very last things that is written for the show for a number of reasons. Sometimes, as writers, we have to go through the writing process and finish our story before we really know what it's about. And the opening number sometimes is the last thing because of that. By the time we get to the end, we realize, oh, that's how the show needs to start. Also, a lot of times in the opening number, you may be referencing musical themes or motifs that happen later in the show. So it's very hard to write an opening number first if you don't already have other songs written. And famously, in so I mentioned Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum before. The opening number for that show is Comedy Tonight, but that was not the first opening number that was written for that show. There were a number of other drafts written for that. Namely, there was a song called Love is in the Air that just, it wasn't landing with the audience. And so audiences were not responding to the show the way that the creative team really wanted them to respond to it. And eventually, Sondheim called, what was he called? I don't know if it was George Firth. He called somebody, it might have been George Firth. And whoever he called, I can't remember exactly, but said to him, you have to hit the audience over the head with a frying pan with what you want from them at the beginning of the show. And if the show is going to be a farce, which Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum is, then that landed Sondheim on the idea of Comedy Tonight. And once he wrote that song, all of a sudden the entire show worked that much better because the audience knew exactly what to expect right from the get-go.
I think that's a perfect phrase. Frying pan over the head. That's what the opening number is about. Whether it's a big, clear, direct statement, you're in for a comedy tonight, or something more subtle or different based on the world. I think that says it all right there as far as a short overview. Was there anything else you wanted to add to opening number, or any questions you like to ask yourself or like to think about when approaching it?
I think that pretty much covers it. I also have a fun story about another show, but we can maybe discuss that in bonus content.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, I was going to say, I'll say one other thing about opening numbers and about where they get written. So I have this one show I'm working on where initially, when we kind of had the idea, I wrote a tune that was more specific to the sequences of events that happen at the start. And I knew it probably wasn't a good opening number, but it became more of a character discovery for me to write a song for the characters. Then we wrote another song that happened later. It was probably like the fourth, fifth tune we wrote, not necessarily as an opening number, but once we wrote it, we said that's the show. The opening number came as a result of some exploration, some discovery, writing other tunes, and then we knew how to invite people into this world.
I love that.
Yeah. Okay, so next type of song you mentioned is the I Want song, which most people know about. So, but we can dive in.
Sure. Yeah, so the I want song or the I am song under the umbrella of character establishment song. So this song is sung by the protagonist. It happens usually within the first 15 minutes of any show, and it is the song that sets that character in motion. It sets their journey in motion for the rest of the show. Defines oftentimes what they want, or who they are, what their values or philosophies are, and it drives the rest of the story. It's the engine of the narrative, and it gives the audience something to root for. We have to know what our protagonist wants, and we have to know who they are in order to be able to root for them and to care about what happens to them for the rest of the story.
Absolutely. And I like how you rephrased it as a character establishment song. I think the term I want song has become so popular and ubiquitous, and we even start the show with it. But really, when we go back to that idea of a job, what is the core function of these tunes? Character establishment song is probably the umbrella for this type of moment. How do we similarly introduce this character in the same way that the opening number introduced the whole show? The I Want song and the character establishment song needs to establish this is who they are, this is what they want, and this is what's going to propel us forward. And again, that can range in a whole lot of different ways, different shows, different characters. Are there some that jump out to you as like showing that range, or unique approaches or definitive approaches?
Yeah, I mean, this is one thing that Golden Age Broadway does very, very well. Think of Eliza Doolittle sitting on the steps of Covent Garden singing "All I Want Is a Room Somewhere." Wouldn't it be lovely, right? Wouldn't it be lovely? That is her character establishment song. Um, Millennials would be able to identify "Part of Your World" as one of the defining I want songs or character establishment songs of the shows of our youth. Howard Ashman brought the I want song to Disney, so that was the quintessential Disney I want song. So,
Which, by the way, I mean, what I've heard is that he also had to fight for it.
well, yeah.
Howard Ashman needed to fight for it. It was cut because in test screenings there was some issues, classic Hollywood situation, but obviously it's now kind of the most iconic definitive I want song, at least to our generation, and an amazing tune. I think for all of these it could be helpful to also dive into just some what are some of those specific questions we try to ask ourselves when writing an I want
Mm.
song. I know we're trying to find that hook, but coming back to what is that character's core thing that they're looking for? What do they want to do? I know it's obvious to say it, but like asking those questions.
Yeah, there's a little bit more even to it than that, I think. When you're talking about a character establishment song, uh, usually there are a few options. So either the character has to want something that they either end up getting by the end of the show, or they end up getting it but not in the way that they expected, or they end up realizing that that's actually not at all what they want or what they need, and they end up with something completely different at the end. So those are really the three most popular options for a character establishment song, and it sets us up for a really nice journey. So those are questions that I would ask as I'm writing.
Yeah, that's a great point. Are we going to set up a want that they achieve, or a want that they realize they don't need? Or, is it subverted? Obviously, the Wizard and I in Wicked
Mhm.
is she's singing about this great relationship she's going to have with the wizard, but because of that specific story and Wizard of Oz, we all know it's not going to end well, right? So it becomes this sort of inverted I want song, but it still is her want, and it still is what she wants in that moment. And it's a great example of how we can write an I want song that isn't always so literal to what the story is going to be. Part of your world, she wants to become a human, she becomes a human. Things don't go exactly the way she'd liked at first, but that's where we end up. Sticking with Disney, out there in Hunchback of Notre Dame, right? He wants to be out there because he's been locked up. Like, it's very straightforward. Obviously, things don't go as well. Things don't go as well for all of them. I guess that's also part of fairy tales.
Yeah, it does happen that way, doesn't it?
The other thing that I would just say with I want songs and character establishment songs is that they are as a songwriter and as a storyteller, a really fun way to get inside the character. It is this truly uh, fun experience for me to go in and say, what is this character doing? What are they looking at? Where do they want to go? Who are they? I love diving in and making those lists of where they could possibly be trying to define themselves and what is the core thing that will set them up for success or tragedy, in so many
Yeah.
tunes.
And it's usually the first song I write for any show that I am writing. That's my go-to.
That's a great point and a great note. Whereas the opening number can oftentimes be the last one, the character establishment one can often be the first one because you got to connect with that main character. You have to be fully in their perspective and know where you're trying to go, and that can help everything else flow out. I love that.
Yeah, and musically too, I think their whatever their musical language is really kind of sets the tone for everything that happens around it. So I think even musically, it's important to tackle that at the very beginning.
That's a great note. I like that you bring up musically because the I Want song has probably some of the most range musically that you could take it. There are I Want songs that are ballads, there are I Want songs that are, up tempo. Uh yeah, I think that's a great note that the I Want song really has that full range of musical options because it's the full range of characters, right? Next we have, well, the ballad is one we have listed next.
Yeah, and so these are not necessarily in order of how they would appear in a show, but with the exception of the opening number and the "I Want" song, probably. But yeah, so we have ballads, and I have always been taught in every in like in the BMI workshop, they teach this way: spend your ballad dollars wisely. So ballads are by nature slower songs. Um, and they can be comedic or dramatic. You can have comedic ballads and dramatic ballads, and usually it's a way of connecting much more deeply with the character who's singing it. And it could be any character. You could have a villain singing a ballad. You could have your protagonist singing a ballad, a secondary character singing a ballad. Like there's no real rule there. You just want to be careful how many ballads you're introducing into your show because they do slow they slow the pacing down quite a bit.
Do you have any way of defining the threshold between a ballad and just a slower tempo tune?
Mid-tempo number or a slower tempo tune. Um, I don't think there's a hard and fast rule. I think you kind of feel it in your gut. Like when you listen to, um, uh, oh, what's the one from Hairspray? I Know Where I've Been. You listen to I Know Where I've Been. That is a ballad. It's an anthemic ballad, but it is a ballad. That song goes slow and it goes hard.
And that's also going back to these different types of songs serve different functions where the I Want song is all about character and therefore lots of musical range. The ballad song, story wise, usually helps us connect deeper with a character, but it's also often a tune for the performer to show their chops, to really dig deep. It's a moment for the audience to enjoy this performance in a different way. It's a little bit of a breather, even though it might have a lot of emotional weight, but there is this intentional uh, musicality that we expect and want in a show. Yes, we want the song and dance and the flashy numbers and the fast numbers and all of that showiness. But part of a show can be that moment of slow.
One of my favorite examples of this is "Send in the Clowns" from A Little Night Music. Sondheim, right? It was written while they were out of town, while they were in rehearsals, and it was written specifically for Glynis Johns. In that scene, originally, um, the male character in that scene had a song, and the scene was sort of from his perspective. And what the creative team realized was they really needed the song to be from her perspective, from Desiree's perspective. And Sondheim already knew the actor he was working with. He already knew Glynis Johns. He knew what her strengths and weaknesses were. And so that was one of the fastest songs he ever wrote in a single night. He wrote Send in the Clowns. She learned it the next day, and they slotted it into the performance, and it changed the entire show.
And then, of course, went on to become Sondheim's biggest pop hit when Sinatra recorded it, which I think we've talked about in some of our previous podcasts
Yes.
already. But that's part of what I think I'm connecting with here, is that ballads sometimes are written more for the performers than the character. Of course, the lyrics and the substance of the song should be the character and the story, but sometimes you are thinking more toward that performance and giving that performer a moment,
Yeah,
which,
that's important too.
yeah, it's all part of it. Are there any tips or tricks or insights on, like, when to know, yeah, this is time for a ballad? We've earned it. Let's spend our money.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think when as you're writing and you're kind of getting a sense of what the pacing of the show is, what kinds of songs are existing in these moments, because it has to you have to slot in a ballad where it makes sense for us to take a breath and take a pause. I typically don't necessarily plan. I don't plan those moments necessarily. I may have a moment that I know wants to be a song, but I may not know that it's a ballad yet until I kind of see what's in place around it. But it's going to typically be a moment of profound reflection or change for a character. So usually you're going to find a ballad in Act Two. Sometimes you'll find one in Act One. The vast majority of them you will find in Act Two, because that tends to be where the great moments of change and revelation happen.
Oftentimes ballads are in Act Two. It doesn't mean it has to be. Plenty of ballads in Act One that I'm sure we could find. And if you can think of some of the great Act One ballads, please, share them in the comments and let us know. But that's a good tip as well. As you're writing a show, a ballad is probably going to come in Act Two, or at least sort of, put that in the back of your head as you're song spotting and diving in. I have a question. Is there a chance that Les Mis has the most ballads?
There is a chance, yes. It does have an awful lot of ballads. Les Mis is an outlier in so many ways. We could spend a whole episode just talking about Les Mis. We could spend a whole 3 episodes talking about Les Mis. Um, yes, it's quite possible.
Yeah, and I'm sure we will. We have plenty of time. We'll talk
We
about
do.
Les Mis when we get to it. But actually, on that note, I have a question, and we can cut this if we need to. But is this I Swear by the Stars? Would you call that a ballad or just a mid tempo?
I would call that a ballad.
Right?
Yeah, I would call that a ballad. I would call I Dreamed a Dream a ballad. I would call Bring 'Em Home a ballad. I would call On My Own a ballad. I would call Empty Chairs at Empty Tables a ballad.
There you have it. If you want to learn about ballads, revisit Les Mis, perhaps.
A lot of ballads in there. Don't take all of your craft notions from Les Mis. It's a very successful musical, but it's an outlier. And we'll talk about that some other time.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm sure it'll probably come up in the bonus segment as well. Okay, great. So then let's move on to the conditional love song. Was the next one?
This is one of my absolute favorite kinds of songs to listen to and to write. The conditional love song is usually it's a romantic moment, but not always. You could have buddy buddy conditional love songs too, that are sort of friendship oriented as well. But a conditional love song is a love song, but it's where the love is expressed indirectly. So, for example, you have the original of originals in this medium is If I Loved You from Carousel, where Billy and Julie sing If I Loved You. And they're not outright singing I love you because they can't say that to each other yet. So it's a conditional love song. If I loved you, life might look like this, or I might do this. If I loved you. Another while we're in the Rodgers and Hammerstein vein, people will say we're in love from Oklahoma. It's too early in their story for them to say I love you yet, so they get around it. They sort of tap dance. They tiptoe around it by saying people will say we're in love if you hold my hand too much. If you do this, people will say we're in love. Oh, what horror, right? So it thrives on subtext. These songs thrive on subtext, and love is often expressed through conditions, not declarations. You will almost always find some kind of conditional language like if or maybe or might. You'll find those conditional things in there. If we're talking more contemporary musicals, Dear Evan Hansen, If I Could Tell Her, conditional love song.
People will say We're in Love is one of my favorite all-time songs. And it's one of those tunes that will just come into my head and I'll enjoy it. And in prepping for this, I was like, oh yeah, just kind of revisiting these. And I realized, oh yeah, the conditional love song feels like it very specifically came out of this medium of storytelling through songs. We have so many great love songs that have been written throughout history and will continue to be written. But when we have two characters that are either in a will they, won't they romance or a rom-com or a setting where society says they can't be together yet, it creates this added drama to the relationship. And therefore, it created this type of song, which is a love song with conditions or with parameters or not yet or all sorts of ways to look at I'm falling in love with you or I love you, but I'm not going to say it. And that is because of story. That is because of character. I haven't looked it up, but I'm guessing this is one of the types of songs that is so specific to the genre.
Yeah, I would agree. And I also think this is my personal opinion, but I also think they're way more interesting than straight up love songs.
Completely. And maybe it goes back to opera. Maybe there's some in like Marriage of Figaro or something like, again, story-based songwriting. But as far as I'm concerned, this is coming out of musical theater and the wonderful drama and obstacles that come up when you are telling a story. When I was first learning how to be a screenwriter and how to tell stories, I was taught every scene needs forces of opposition.
Mhm.
That's how you write a scene in a movie or in a play or anything. You need forces of opposition because if your characters can just get from A to B, that's not interesting. Even in a single scene, there needs to be forces of opposition. And this song, this type of song, the conditional love song, is, I think, one of the greatest forms of that, of elevating an art form and transforming one type of craft by kind of merging two together.
Yeah, I mean, we want to see conflict. Conflict is interesting. When there's no conflict, why are we watching? Why are we watching something? Like we watch to see conflict. So that's what these songs create. They create conflict. You're watching someone want to say something or clearly think something and saying the opposite or just not quite saying what they want to say, and that creates conflict. It's interesting to watch.
Yeah, and as songwriters, it's so fun to come up with how can we come up with those hooks or those turns of phrases that are mm, filled with subtext, filled with uh, push and pull, with that back and forth, and also I think as a result, a lot of conditional love songs are duets. I would assume, right?
Yep. Yeah. Most of them are. Yes, the vast majority of them are.
Which is also fun when writing. I always get excited. When can I write a duet? When can we dive in and have two different characters singing? Because it also helps uh, figure out how to turn the phrase based on their perspective, which is one of my favorite things to dive into when writing lyrics. Not to mention, it can then lead to really fun musical things where maybe there's a harmony or a counterpoint or any of that type of part of the songwriting. All right, so next on our list is the comedy song or the list song.
Yeah. So comedy songs, I would maybe separate them because you could make almost any kind of song into a list song. I mean, some comedy songs just happen to tend that way anyway. But I mean, you could have an I Want song that's a list song too. But comedy songs are. there, I would also argue that comedy songs are the hardest kind of song to write, um, because they have to be structured in such a way where you're building on a joke. You can't give everything away at the beginning, otherwise, this is not. It's like that's not how comedy works. So they have to be very carefully structured. A lot of times, the technicality and the complexity of the writing can be uh, really challenging. But I would also say that comedy song is probably the one kind of song in a show that you can't have too many of, because everybody likes to laugh and laughing is always good. And if you can make people laugh, keep them laughing. I mean, look at Book of Mormon. How many comedy songs are in the Book of Mormon? And I don't hear anybody complaining.
Right, and they still have heart and sincerity to it in within all the comedy and the farce and the shenanigans. That's a great point. That comedy songs are a great way to connect with the audience in a breath of joy, right? Of laughter or absurdity. And it again keeps that pacing going where we're inviting them into all this conflict, like we were just talking about, right? And now we're going to let them laugh. We're going to, whether it's a side character singing a song, or the main character, singing a comedy song. Although I would say that oftentimes comedy songs are given to side characters.
They are a lot of times, and then there are also a lot of examples where you have lead characters. I mean, Adelaide's Lament is up there in one of the all time classic comedy songs, and she's very much a central character. But yeah, I mean, think of Marcellus in Music Man. I mean, he gets some great comedy, some great comedy moments in there. So yes, a lot of times the secondary or even tertiary characters get comedy songs. Think about Brush Up Your Shakespeare from Kiss Me Kate, the two gangsters.
Exactly.
That's one of my all-time favorite comedy songs. Also, Guys and Dolls from Guys and Dolls, the two guys singing that, which we could also say is a charm song, but we'll get there in a minute. Um, and I mean, Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder. There's some great comedy songs in that show. I mean, they're great. It's a tried and true, tried and tested over many many decades. And if you write them well, they work.
And they also become kind of showy tunes for the composer,
Hmm.
especially if it becomes a patter song or a list song. It often can be a more complex song to write, which is classic, right? Comedy is the thing that we just get to laugh at and just sort of enjoy. It maybe asks the least of us as a viewer, but often requires the most of us as a writer. And that can also be fun.
Not Getting Married Today from Company, great, right? Of course, great. And then on the flip side, if you think of, there's some great comedy songs that are ballads in, for example, in Spam-A-Lot, you've got like Whatever Happened to My Part, which is this big anthemic ballad, but it is very much a comedy song. And there's actually another one in that show that King Arthur sings called Alone. I'm all alone, which actually, we could talk about this some other time, but the lyrics of that song are not inherently comedic. But what makes that moment so funny is the other character's reaction to what he is what he is singing, because he's like, dude, I'm right here. So it's very funny.
Hey, that is a great note, that we are writing songs, but they fit in a story with characters on a stage. And there are so many different ways to find comedy. There are so many different forms of communicating humor at our disposal that you could write a relatively straightforward song, but you put the character in a certain context on the stage in the scene and it becomes hilarious. And that's so inspiring to me as a writer, and can help maybe if I'm blocked or trying to find the angle, maybe I take a step away from the lyrics or the music and just go, where are they? What is going on stage? And that could be the breakthrough and maybe simplify how we get lots of jokes.
Yeah, it's so important as writers too to think about what is the stage business, what is happening on stage, because it's so much of what we write is situational and contextual. So And a director always loves to know that you have something in mind for the characters who are singing at the moment, because Sondheim made that mistake when he wrote Maria and had no idea what the actors were going to be doing. And when Jerome Robbins asked him, "What's Tony doing?" and he said, "I don't know." He's like, "Well, how the heck do you expect me to stage this if you have no idea what he's supposed to be doing?" So that was the last time that Steve ever did that.
Exactly. And again, I like this through this. We keep rediscovering why it is this unique combination of various storytelling tools and techniques. Yes, we have the words. Yes, we have the music. We have the characters. We have the story, but we also have the staging that can help inspire all of it. And the more we're thinking of it as songwriters, the more I feel we just have options to play in, and we can keep finding our way through.
So I'm realizing as we're talking about all of these that we're mentioning an awful lot of songs and an awful lot of shows. So we will, to the best of our ability, we will include the songs that we talked about in our episodes, and if possible, links to where you can listen to those songs. So if you're not familiar with any of them, you can go through and listen to them, because everything that we're mentioning here, you should listen to. They're really great.
Yeah, and even if you've already known them, back to my I Want song of revisiting the classics, it's always good to go back and hear things, especially some of these iconic ones, and you'll hear them with new ears every time, I think. So that's the end of part 1 of the overview of types of songs and musicals. Please come back next week for part 2. Thanks again.